In 1984, Karl Lagerfeld was still fresh as the new artistic director of Chanel, having taken the reins just a year earlier. His task? To reinvent the iconic house codes without losing their essence. The collection that fall was his daring blend of classic Chanel and bold innovation, a foreshadowing of his legacy. The collection drew heavily on Coco Chanel's timeless aesthetics but with an edgy, 1980s twist. Lagerfeld was inspired by Chanel's signature tweeds and pearls, but he exaggerated proportions and layered textures, adding a more dramatic silhouette. The collection reflected the decade's flair for excess while remaining sophisticated, like 80s power suits meeting Parisian elegance. Gold chains, camellia motifs, and quilted bags were prominent, showing Lagerfeld's respect for Coco's legacy while pushing it forward. One standout was the oversized tweed coat with a cinched waist, a nod to Coco's original silhouettes but with more volume and boldness. Leather skirts, structured blazers, and chunky accessories added a rock-and-roll attitude that felt daring yet refined. The collection made heavy use of black and white, Chanel's iconic palette, with pops of metallic. Did you know Lagerfeld used actual Chanel costume jewelry pieces from the brand's archives for this show? By mixing archival pieces with new designs, he sent a message: Chanel's past was still very much alive in its future. The Chanel Fall 1984 ready-to-wear collection solidified Lagerfeld's role as the perfect successor to Coco. His work from this era set a standard for blending respect for brand heritage with a modern edge, something that would come to define his work and ensure Chanel remained a timeless symbol of luxury. The early 1980s were all about excess, big hair, bold colors, and a rebellious sense of style that embraced maximalism. Thierry Mugler took this zeitgeist and turned it up a notch. His work is often characterized by exaggerated silhouettes, strong shoulders, nipped-in waists, and dramatic flourishes that give the wearer an otherworldly quality. This fall 1984 collection was no exception, showcasing Mugler's commitment to creating superhuman looks that transformed women into cinematic heroines. Many of his models looked like they had stepped out of a 1940s black-and-white thriller, yet with a futuristic twist. He drew from classic femme fatale archetypes and gave them a modern edge, layering glamour with hints of danger. This concept of power dressing was crucial in the 1980s, and Mugler's collection communicated that a woman could be both alluring and intimidating. The lines between high fashion and costume were intentionally blurred, with Mugler showing an unapologetic love for theatricality. One of the most notable aspects of the collection was its architectural approach to clothing. Thierry Mugler had a passion for building shapes that enhanced and exaggerated the female form. The strong-shouldered blazers and capes gave his models a superhero-like stature, evoking images of caped vigilantes or queens from another realm. He was inspired by classical sculpture and often sought to sculpt his garments directly on the body, using fabric as his medium. Mugler's use of the corset is a prime example of his sculptural techniques. Corsets were often integrated into jackets, dresses, and evening wear, creating a streamlined, hourglass effect. They weren't simply undergarments in Mugler's vision, they became outerwear pieces, combining structure and sensuality. Leather, vinyl, and metallic fabrics were predominant, giving many of his pieces an almost armor-like quality. This fashion armor wasn't just meant to protect, it was designed to empower. These fabrics reflected light, creating a mesmerizing effect under the runway lights, which accentuated the dramatic curves and contours of the garments. The use of leather and vinyl referenced elements of fetish fashion, something Mugler wasn't afraid to embrace. His work often danced on the edge of fantasy and provocation, creating designs that seemed equally at home on a fashion runway or a performance stage. This provocative edge was balanced by luxurious, elegant details, making the pieces accessible yet daring. In a sense, Mugler was blurring the lines between wearable art and functional clothing, a hallmark of his career. Thierry Mugler was deeply inspired by mythology and art, drawing from figures like Cleopatra and Joan of Arc to create powerful, mythical silhouettes. And this collection was inspired by these ancient archetypes as well as contemporary science fiction imagery. It was as if Mugler envisioned his models as deities, otherworldly figures embodying both feminine allure and intimidating strength. This mythological influence is particularly visible in his capes, flowing skirts, and regal headpieces, which added an air of mystery to each look. Science fiction was another strong influence. Mugler's work has always had a futuristic edge, with metallic fabrics and robotic-like elements that give his pieces an almost cyborg quality. The Fall-Winter 1984 collection imagined a world where women were warriors, navigating a post-apocalyptic world in armor-like attire. There is a sense of escapism here, but also empowerment. Mugler was creating an aspirational world in which women were fearless, powerful, and in control. By the 1980s, Yves Saint Laurent had already revolutionized fashion several times over. From introducing the tuxedo suit for women to his Le Smoking jacket in the 1960s, he consistently redefined what femininity could look like. Fall 1984 was an ode to the legacy he had built, yet it offered something fresh. The collection revisited these iconic pieces, updating them with new details and cuts that made them both classic and contemporary. This season, Saint Laurent offered interpretations of his iconic Le Smoking in several variations, each with slight differences that added depth to the design. He played with tuxedo jackets that featured velvet lapels, satin trims, and tailored cuts that emphasized a woman's natural shape while still giving an air of authority. This choice demonstrated Saint Laurent's belief that style was timeless and that certain designs, when executed well, could transcend generations. The 1980s are often remembered for the trend of broad shoulders, and Saint Laurent's collection incorporated this in a way that felt graceful and sophisticated. He used structured shoulder pads, but softened them with draping and layering that gave his jackets a more refined feel. This was power dressing, but it was not aggressive, it was an evolution of his earlier work, merging strength with elegance. Saint Laurent's use of the power shoulder, however, came with his signature twist. He softened this trend by juxtaposing sharp shoulder lines with flowing skirts, creating a balanced silhouette that celebrated the female form. His jackets and coats often had exaggerated shoulders but were styled over feminine blouses and skirts, playing with the contrast between masculine and feminine that he was so known for. This approach allowed Saint Laurent to celebrate the trend of strength and confidence that defined the 1980s, while still remaining true to his own aesthetic of effortless grace. For Fall-Winter 1984, Saint Laurent experimented with a range of rich, luxurious fabrics that exuded sophistication. Silk, velvet, satin, and brocade made frequent appearances, often in jewel tones that lent an opulent feel to the collection. The color palette was a mix of rich blues, deep burgundies, emerald greens, and classic blacks. This choice of colors and materials underscored the theme of timeless luxury, as Saint Laurent aimed to create garments that felt not only beautiful but also enduring. Brocade and velvet featured heavily, giving pieces a lavish, almost regal feel, particularly in evening wear. He used these fabrics to create sumptuous blouses, tailored blazers, and fluid gowns that showcased the textures as central elements of each design. Brocade jackets in rich golds and greens were standouts, evoking a sense of the Baroque without feeling outdated. There was a vintage, almost historic sensibility to these materials, yet the modern cuts and styling made them feel fresh and relevant. Romanticism has always been a theme in Saint Laurent's work, and this season saw him playing with ruffles, bows, and draping in a way that felt both dramatic and restrained. Blouses and dresses featured delicate, soft ruffles along the neckline, cascading down the chest in a way that was refined rather than overwhelming. The draping was skillful, accentuating the silhouette without adding bulk. Saint Laurent managed to make ruffles, a classically feminine detail, feel contemporary and even powerful. His use of bows in this collection was also notable. Large, sculptural bows were incorporated into blouses and evening dresses, adding a touch of whimsy. Unlike other designers who might use such details for pure decoration, Saint Laurent made bows and ruffles integral to the structure of each garment. His restrained approach to these elements gave the collection a romantic, almost ethereal quality, while still keeping it grounded in sophistication. As I told, Yves Saint Laurent was one of the first designers to introduce the concept of le smoking. The tuxedo suit for women, and the fall 1984 collection was a nod to this legacy. He explored gender fluidity in fashion long before it became mainstream, and this collection further played with the balance between masculine and feminine. He blended sharp tailoring with soft fabrics, creating silhouettes that gave women both presence and allure. In fall 1984, Saint Laurent's suits featured high-waisted trousers, crisp lines, and slim lapels, creating a look that was sharp and refined. Paired with softer, flowing blouses, these suits captured a sensual yet confident aesthetic. Saint Laurent's work often suggested that the wearer could embody multiple identities. She could be feminine, masculine, strong, or soft, all at once. This approach was especially powerful in the 1980s, as more women were entering the workforce and redefining their roles in society. The collection celebrated this duality and offered women the freedom to express it through their clothing. The collection was an instant success, not only because it resonated with current trends but also because it carried an enduring quality. Saint Laurent's emphasis on luxury, quality, and craftsmanship meant that these pieces were not just of the moment, they were designed to be timeless. Saint Laurent's work influenced a generation of designers and cemented the tuxedo as a staple in women's fashion. His reimagining of power dressing offered an alternative to the more aggressive styles of the time, presenting a vision of strength and elegance that remains relevant. This influence can still be seen today in how designers approach gender, structure, and timeless elegance. This collection encapsulated the timeless essence of Yves Saint Laurent. His work was never about following trends, but about setting them, reinterpreting classic themes and making them relevant for each new decade. It reinforced Saint Laurent's belief in the power of style to transcend time, offering women a means of expressing both their independence and their elegance. The blending of masculine and feminine, the opulent materials, and the enduring silhouettes made Fall 1984 a collection that remains influential and iconic. Saint Laurent proved once again that fashion could be more than clothing,